Everybody else
for the
muted for
update,
now.
Bob.
Yep. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Mitch, do you want to unmute yourself and kind of kick everything else off? Since
But
you
you're
really
doing
are
such a
still
great
in
job,
charge.
Dave. You're doing such a great job. You're on.
Yeah, I know. I'll introduce John, but you want to start with the pledge and such first, like I mean,
All right.
we already did the happy, I would think that qualifies for happy bucks, so with what Bob said.
Excited. Yeah. Good news. Our prayers continue to be with you, Bob, and your family.
Thanks, Mitch.
All right. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, everybody. I pledge allegiance
Pledge
to the
allegiance
flag
to the flag of the United States of
States
America,
of America.
to the republic,
To the republic
which
which
it
stands
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here this evening. I mentioned for those of you that from our club that may have gotten on a little bit later, I have the car wash fundraiser, which is set for June. I have it out on social media. It's on our Facebook page. So get there, share it if you do Facebook. It'll come to you by email in the newsletter. I'll get it to Dave. I have sent it out to the Overland Business Association, 250 people that are on my list. So we'll get that kicked off. Remember that the code is 2020. Should be real easy to remember because 2020 is not going to be easy to forget.
No. And I will put it, once you send it to me, I'll put it on the website too.
All right, perfect.
So we can link it that way.
All right.
Anything else? Before
we do have, do you have a program for next week yet, Dave?
I do. The only one I'm waiting on right now is June 10. Al gave me a few names. I put a call out for Sue Wallace of the USO. Just called her today. She hasn't gotten back to me, so I'll try her cell phone tomorrow and see what I come up with. June is booked except for the 10th. I'm starting to work on July now.
Okay.
Dave, I
So
have
the
an idea for the 10th that I'll send you.
Okay. That'll work.
And
It's not just up to me, guys. If you got some ideas, send them to me. I'll, otherwise we may have to listen to Jerry or Margie, and I'm just throwing that one out there. Or Julie. Sorry, Julie, I forgot. You're right in the middle, and I couldn't see you. Desperate times. What can I say? We may have to bring them back in again. I'm just gonna dispense with everything else. I have had the privilege and the pleasure, not quite as long as Todd has, of working with John Germ, but I've had many experiences with John. We were aides to John 2 years ago in Springfield, I believe it was. He was the easiest person I have ever been an aide for. He carried his own luggage. He helped load it in the car. I couldn't ask for anybody better. He invited us up to his room, which is a beautiful room, for what we thought was one evening for a get-together before dinner. I get a call from him. He talks to us the next evening afternoon. He said, "Where the hell were you?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We were supposed to come up every night." I said, "Well, I just knew the one night." John is a gentleman. He is very down to earth. And love it or not with polio, as far as what you feel about the fundraising, John has been extremely instrumental in getting that going. And he asked what tonight, and I said, the one thing I would like for him to pass along is the story he has told, I don't know how many thousand times, of how we wound up with Bill Gates' money. After that, the floor and the door are wide open. John, I'll turn it over to you, and you've got it.
Well, thank you, David, I think. Let me start off with, unfortunately, some very bad news, and that is that about 3 hours ago, Frank Devlin passed away. He had recently contacted, about a month ago, pancreatic cancer. He waited a while before he went to Houston, and then he passed about 2 hours ago. you know, Frank wrote all the books called Frank Talks, and then Gloria Rita wrote one that says Frank Talks Too Much. But Frank was a great Rotarian and was a tremendous friend to a lot of people around the world. I don't think Frank ever met someone that he didn't make a friend with and collect your business card and everything. So as we think about things like that, as we think about Bob's son and we think about Frank and Frank's family, so let's keep those individuals in our prayers. You know, we're living in different times. These certainly are different times, and the Rotary Club of Overland is a great club. It's been very involved with a lot of civic local projects, a lot of projects globally. You've got the premier audiovisual man in your club that's been used by every past governor, every district, every director that I can recall. And you got the premier grant writer in Todd Lindley, as past district governor, I think in 10 and 11 or so, about that time. And Todd was very passionate about grants. He taught a lot of people how to do grants. He got a lot of money out of the Rotary Foundation. And then I guess I would say one of his biggest achievements was to work very hard and steadily on the pioneer clubs and to work to get a lot of money into the peace program. And because of that and some matching funds, we ended up with having our own Peace Fellow program that people in zones 30, 31, and those that left zones 30 and 31, we're now going to be regions, and I'm lost. You know, we got some other number now. We're number 37 or something. Hell, I can't remember all these things that I told them I'm getting too old to change. So I'm still going to say it's zone 30 and 31. So, but you know, we've had a good fellowship with our two zones, Heart of America, and I think that, you know, we have the Heart to Heart program with Mexico that we're doing a lot of work down there with and everything. So, you know, I was reading up about your dictionary project and furnishing dictionaries to the third grade students. And I know when I was director, I challenged the two zones. Back then it was 29 and 30. And I challenged them that if you wanted to make friends, the best way to do that was to do a grant. And I said, if we had 24 districts at the time between the two zones, and I said, if each one of y'all will put up $1,000, I'll put up $1,000, which will give us $25,000. Just so happens the trustee chairman that year was Jim Lacey, who happened to be from Cookville. So I said, I'll get $25,000 out of Jim, and we'll do $50,000. And I said, I want the grant. I'm not going to write it. You got to find somebody in your class that will write the grant. And they did, and then we ended up with a grant in Thailand. And I know y'all had a separate grant in Thailand with a wheelchair project, but we also did water wells and everything. So we've had a lot of building of the classes and had fun at the international assemblies. And, you know, that's what Rotary's all about. It's having fun and doing good work. And y'all continue to do that good work and everything. And then one of the things I'm going to learn a lot more about is I just don't know how you do a mouse race. And but apparently you make a lot of money running these little rats around the floor and around wheels and stuff. So that's great because you give some of that money to polio, and I want to thank you for that. But, you know, with COVID, all of a sudden, our lives were disrupted. I mean, we have a different mode of operation now than any of us ever thought about we would have. I remember back what we used to say, some of us says in the good old days, when fax machines were just coming online and PowerPoint slides were coming online, overhead projectors and all this. And whoever thought about Zoom, whoever thought about Facebook, whoever thought about some of this stuff that we're doing now. And as somebody said a few minutes ago, some of the clubs are having better attendance now with Zoom than they had when they were having in person. And so I thought, well, you know, we are disruptive. Our jobs, some people have been laid off, some stores have closed. One of the companies I got stock in filed bankruptcy. This ain't too good. Fortunately, I didn't have a lot of stock in it, but you know, the economy is up and down. It's back up tremendously today. I never thought he'd get above the Dow to get it back up to 25 to 26,000, but it is. So you go a lot of that. Clubs are losing members. But yesterday I spoke to the Rotary Club of Lincoln, Nebraska, which is club number 14. They were down beginning this year, and they're now up 22. Just because they're doing things differently. They're doing things online, but they're meeting that way. Then you start questioning, well, how do we do projects? Well, you can do your coat projects because you can have somebody else deliver them, or you can deliver them. You can do your food pantry projects because you can still protect yourself, and different states have got different rules about how you do that. You can still have the Zoom meetings. So you're still having the fellowship and the fun that you can have. But I guess it tells me, though, that while we are disruptive, let's take that disruption and become innovative. Let's think about how we can continue to grow Rotary and how we can continue to connect the world through Rotary. And we can do it with other means. We don't have to be there in person necessarily to do things. Yes, it's going to have an effect on our grants because we got to figure out a new way to do the community assessment that we have to do. So I think we need to be optimistic. It's too easy to be pessimistic and say, we can't do this because we can't meet in person. So let's think about how we can meet and how we can do things. And I always say you got to think out of the box. And most people have seen the little diagram of 9 dots of how you have to get out of that box to end up with your little umbrella outside there. But you've got to think out of the box. And I guess the person that I think, you know, Paul Harris certainly thought out of the box when he said we now get together and we got to form this organization called Rotary, and we're going to go with a classification system of high ethical individuals. You know, I think that Arch Plump thought out of the box when he said in Atlanta in 1917, I think it was, that we need to create an endowment for doing good in the world. And, you know, from Kansas City convention, it was $26.50 that was turned over to start it. Now we're talking about over $1 billion in assets and expectancies that we have. We're raising over $100 million every year for the annual programs fund, in addition to what we're doing for polio. So that's out of the box thinking. That's thinking differently. It's challenging us to do things that we know we can do if somebody just pushes us in the right direction. So think about how we can do that. The other person I think that thought out of the box quite a bit was a guy named Sir Clem Renoff. And some of you have heard me tell some of these stories before, but, you know, Sir Clem Renoff read about smallpox being eradicated, and he called one of his governors. And I know we got the governor-elect on the line here, so be careful if you answer the phone from the president of Rotary International and what they may ask you to do. Todd can tell you that. So, but he's read about smallpox being eradicated, and he thought that, well, is there something like this that Rotary could do? And Rotary back then, 1979, was all about local communities. It had nothing to do with worldwide programs whatsoever. So he called John Sever, and John Sever is 88 years old. He now, and he is a doctor, and he knew Dr. Sabin, and he called Dr. Sabin, and they said, yes, we do have a vaccine, and it is possible to eradicate polio. So he called James Bomar from Shelbyville, Tennessee, because James was going to follow him, and said, you know, we can't do this in 1 year, so are you willing to continue the program? And he said, yes. So they got $760,000 from the Rotary Foundation in order to do a health, hunger, and humanity program. Todd, we ain't heard of those in a long time, but that's what it was back then. Health, hunger, and humanity, 3-age, $760,000 to do 2 things. Number 1 was to provide the vaccine, and number 2 was to vaccinate 6 million children in the Philippines. So that started Rotary on a long journey. It was successful. Rotary went to the World Health Organization and said, we think that we can eradicate polio from the world. They wouldn't even let the president of Rotary or the general secretary, Herb Pigman at that time, for Rotary into the room. They set them outside. They then went in there and they talked and came back and said, you're not going to be able to make your presentation because non-governmental organizations do not work well with us, and we just don't believe that you can get the job done. You change your leadership all the time, all those excuses and everything. So Rotary then said, well, what would it take? What would it take in order to eradicate polio? $120 million. So I asked Bill Sargent, who was asked to be the IPPC chair at that time. He turned it down. Then he got to thinking about the children and they went back and accepted it. How did you come up with $120 million? He said, well, there's about 120 million children under the age of 5. And for 60 cents, you can give them 3 doses. And therefore, they should be immune to the virus. So they shouldn't get polio. And I said, well, Bill, did you ever think that the people are going to still have babies and everything? He said, no, that didn't cross our mind. So anyway, we ended up with 247 million. Went back to the World Health Organization, and all of a sudden we created this partnership called GPEI, Global Polio Eradication Initiative. World Health Organization, CDC, UNICEF, and Rotary. That was the 4 partners. So don't let anybody tell you that Rotary wasn't there from the start or that this is a governmental program. It really started with one person thinking out of the box, what can they do in order to help the children of the world? We kept on going. So we started the program and we kept going and today we have about 650,000 children per year that are not getting polio, all because of Rotary. We have over 3 billion children that we have vaccinated in 32 different countries. We have 19 million people who are walking today that otherwise wouldn't be walking if it wasn't for Rotary and our partners in providing this vaccine. We do surveillance for 72 different countries. Well, all of a sudden, here comes this COVID. So how has COVID started to affect us in polio? COVID is much like polio. It's carried person to person. So while we've had to slow down our house-to-house work, we've had to suspend the NIDs because we can't go out into these villages. We cannot do the trains where we actually go up and put the drops in a child's mouth. Can't do the airports. But what we can do is we can use our vaccine carriers to carry stool samples so we can still see where polio is and where COVID is. We can use our surveillance systems that Rotary helped build and help fund the laboratories and their surveillance system in order to help do that. We can still promote our water programs and hygiene programs because we know that's where most bacteria comes from, and that's how it's easily transmitted, is that way. So we know we can do those things. We can provide food through the food shelters and families in need. So we can do monitoring and quarantine sites. So all these type of things we can do still today. Well, we came along this way of polio, and we ended up with another fund drive in 2002 and 3. So we had another drive there. We exceeded that drive. It was 85 million. We got 120. Well, then all of a sudden we ended up with a person that said, I'll give you $100 million. So in November 2007, Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation, wired $100 million to the Rotary Foundation. November 2007. We didn't have a campaign. We didn't have a chairman. We had no clue how we were going to get $100 million. But here's a man that's got more money than all but 6 countries in the entire world, sending Rotary $100 million. he said two things, two stipulations. Number one, I want you to spend that money by December the 31st of 2008. So here's somebody that gives you $100 million and tells you to spend it by December the 31st of 2008. Second stipulation is by June the 30th of 2010, I want you to raise $100 million. Now you think in January of 2008, when several of us met in all the incoming district governor elects and the board and the trustees, and we're all out in San Diego, and three people call you into a room and say, we want you to be the chairman of this program. If you don't have some second thoughts and think back. But so everybody, we said, yes, I'll do it, no problem. And it really wasn't a problem. We were, in 2010, we were already halfway there. We were already halfway there. No, 2009, we were halfway there. And so then Bill Gates says, I'll give you another $150 million if you agree to raise $100 more million. And John Osterland, who was the head of the foundation that time as the staff head, he said, what are you going to tell him, John? I said, hell, I ain't going to tell him no. We'll just go raise another $100 million. Well, you guys helped us raise $228 million. So that's how we got started with the Gates Foundation. And that's how we still have relationships with Bill and Melinda Gates. First campaign we had after that was $35 million, and he would give us $2 million for $70 million. No, he'd give us 1.5 times then of the 35 if we would do the 35. So then I negotiated a contract with him that if we would do 50, he'd give us 100. Now here's a person that has never given any other organization a 2-to-1 grant. He usually just gives, 50 million here, 100 million there, 200 million here, I think of dollars and he thinks of millions, but it's okay. But I asked him one time when we were in New York, I said, Bill, why did you give this money to Rotary? You could have given it to WHO. You could have given it to UNICEF and stipulated that they had to do it. And he said, well, it's real easy. Rotary has the passion. Rotary has commitment. Because when you say you're going to do something, you do it. Rotary had boots on the ground. Volunteers that were willing to spend their own money to go to these countries and to do the National Immunization Days and to place those 2 little drops in a child's mouth. He said Rotary has the stewardship to be sure that the funds are spent effectively and efficiently. So think about that out-of-the-box thinking that Arch Clump did, the out-of-the-box thinking that Sir Clem did when they took on this project. COVID hit us pretty hard. But the Rotary Foundation stepped up and put $1 million in there and said, we'll give $25,000 to any district. You're entitled to 1 grant. We'll do $25,000 maximum. Went through 5. We got those. That money was gone in no time. Well, then we put up another $1 million and had to go some more money. All of a sudden, global grants were getting approved for COVID. All of a sudden, some money that was left over from other grants was being repurposed. All of a sudden, Jennifer Jones comes up with an idea, why don't we do a telethon? And they did a telethon on a Saturday. And so far, we spent $19 million on COVID grants. So the Rotary Foundation is really doing a good job, I think, in trying to respond to people's needs, respond to what the people need in their communities. We now have a $50 million grant for the Bill and Melinda Gates Challenge from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. If they do 50, we do 50, they give us 100. That's on a Rotary year basis. So far, Rotary has spent over $2.7 billion, with $1.3 billion of that being Bill and Melinda Gates money. And the interesting thing about their money when they give it to you, there are no stipulations on those funds. They leave it up to the Rotary Foundation to decide how those funds are to be spent. We're going to approve $54 million in June to make up the $150 million that we are spending for this year. But in June, we'll approve 54 million. 12 million of that is going to vaccines. We're down from 125 countries to 3. Afghanistan, Pakistan, and those 2 countries combined have 57 cases. Nigeria, who has not had a case since August of 2016. Hopefully, this year, with COVID, it's had to slow down some because in order to certify a country polio-free, they have to go back to each area. They have to do the surveillance, they have to do the testing, they have to check their records to be sure those records are correct and everything. But the important thing about Nigeria is if Nigeria is declared free, then Africa becomes free. So now we got to do all those countries to verify that their records are still good and they don't have any cases. Heard yesterday that they're now starting to do that electronically. They do have people boots on the ground in some of those areas, so they're being able to do it. The big difference, while there's similarities between COVID and polio, the big difference is with polio, we have a vaccine. We do not have a vaccine with COVID. I personally don't believe you'll have one for another year to 18 months because time it gets through all these tests and everything, and even though they're all working very hard on it, you know, I just don't believe you're going to have one by the end of the year. I think it's going to take into next year in order to get one. So, but we do have the vaccine. As of today, we're at $34.9 million that we've raised toward our 50. So we got another 35, 40 days in order to raise, you know, the $15 million, $16 million that we got to get. We'll get there because I've got faith in Rotarians. I've got faith in people that said, yes, we made a promise to the children of the world and no child should be crippled or paralyzed because we know we have the tools in order to do the job. Let me tell you about Bill Gates. Don't just give us money. Bill Gates calls governmental leaders. He goes out there and spends an extra, his goal for every year, he spends $400 million on polio with $100 million of that coming to us. So he does these things in these other countries and he travels to Afghanistan and Pakistan and Nigeria, Ethiopia, all these different places. But in Atlanta, Georgia, he made a statement that I really truly believe in, and I think it can we can relate to it because of fires, tornadoes, and things that happen in our own communities. And he says, fighting a disease is like fighting fire. It's not enough to put out most of it, you have to get it all. Rotary's generous pledge to the Gamification Initiative will help us extinguish this terrible disease for good. End quote. I don't know how you can get much stronger than that from an individual that says, I've got faith in Rotary. Only 9% of the Rotarians, 9% of the Rotarians in the world have faith in Rotary that gives any money to the Rotary Foundation for polio. 9%. Only 45% of the clubs in Rotary give any money for polio eradication. A lot of districts are doing 20%. A lot of clubs are doing a minimum of $1,500, and your club's already done that. But a lot of people are not doing anything because we haven't educated the newer members about what polio is. Why are we giving money to polio? Well, because it costs $850 million a year, because we have to vaccinate 450 million children a year. Because you see, you just can't give them the vaccine once. You've got to continue to give them that vaccine until there is no more polio. Think what happened in Los Angeles, I guess 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, when we had a measles outbreak. It came in from overseas, and all of a sudden, around Disneyland out there, we had a lot of cases of measles coming in. So it can happen. So I challenge us, even though we're in uncharted waters, we've learned how to do things differently. We've had leaders in the past that think out of the box. Let us think out of the box. Let us think of how we can increase our membership. How can we reconnect with the world electronically and build better partnerships around the world? How can we fundraise and be creative? You know, race has got to be creative. So there's other ways we can do these creative projects that we can do. Electronic telethon raised over $500,000 for COVID. That's creative thinking. Look what's happened recently with all these actors, and what happened last Saturday in the pouring down rain. 4 golfers out there, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Phil Mickelson, and Tiger Woods, playing 18 holes of golf to raise money for COVID. Think out of the box. Think of things that we can do differently. But I think the world needs Rotary now more than it ever has before. And I congratulate the club on the work you're doing. I congratulate you what you have done, but more importantly, I'm going to congratulate you for what you're going to do. Because there are people out there today, and if you go out from your house, if you look to your left, you look to the right, you look across the street, probably one of those 3 people should be a Rotarian, if not all 3. You probably can also look a little bit further in some of the community, and you can find people that cannot read the direction of how to take the medicine. They're doing it because somebody told them how to do it. So there's a lot of work out there that we need to do, but we just got to think about how to do it. So thank you for letting me be with you tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And David, I hope I did what you wanted me to do.
I appreciate it, John. I've got everybody else muted, so if you have a question, unmute yourself and questions or comments. Evidently, you did a very good job, John, because nobody wants to bring anything up.
Well, they want to go eat.
I just like to say that was incredibly informative. I love the personalization you offer.
Hang on a sec.
I just
Go
like
ahead,
to
Judy.
say that was an awesome overview of the polio project and very powerful. I hope that because we've recorded this, we'll be able to maybe use it throughout the district to be able to share the details that you offered in such a personal way. I think it was really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. And it's inspired me.
Good. Thank you. So you're going to go home
Appreciate you.
out the door.
Yeah, I'm not sure how. I'll figure it out.
I appreciate you meeting with us tonight, John, and sharing your story. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Todd. Well, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great evening and enjoyed being with you. Keep up the good work.
Can I ask
Appreciate it, John. Thank you all.
John, can I ask a question?
Oh, whoa. Yeah,
John,
Bob.
did you ever run into a woman by the name of Jenny Berkston in Washington, D.C., who was the spokesperson for polio? Berkston? Jenny Berkston?
Uh-uh.
No, okay. Fine. She's a friend of mine.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Y'all take care.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Good night.